Hello, sisters. My name is Danielle Pettiford, and you are watching the Suitable Help Her podcast. And I'm here to help wives rediscover their purpose and passion in marriage, life, and business. And guess what? I think that we can have it all without compromising our values. And that's something that's big. That's a big thing to say, because at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. What do I stand for? What do I believe? And I want to make sure that I'm bringing you quality content to help you wife better. I'm going to provide you with some sensational guests that's going to bring you insights from their expertise to help you do all that you do and everything that we do. And we say here on this podcast is going to be sprinkled with a healthy dose of Jesus. So if you're ready for it, let's get into it. Last week, we did some fun things. We hit Atlanta up. We were out on the Beltline, and we had the chance to talk to a lot of people out there just to get some insight on what it meant for them to be a wife. What do they think about the roles of being a wife? And I really do think that we had some aha moments and some epiphanies from last week. Just recognizing that there are so many different point of views out there in the world about what it means to actually be a wife, what it means to be a suitable helper. Actually, it was funny because I actually asked quite a few people, what did they even know what it means to be a suitable helper, or have they even heard that before? And it's interesting. A few people said that they had never heard of that before. They never heard that term, suitable helper. And it actually made me think about how, the elders are supposed to pass things down by storytelling, right? And so, old women are supposed to pass things down to the young women. Old men are supposed to pass things down to the young men so that knowledge continues to transfer. And we're up against a lot, I think, in this generation, because not only do we speak completely different languages. I mean, my kids come home with words I've never heard before, and I actually fully need definitions, right? We don't even speak the same language. So if we're not passing that information down, the younger generation is going to be clueless. So I really do think that this is a big responsibility. It's a mantle on our shoulders to help people understand what God's intention was when he created the first foundation, which is marriage. It's funny because when I think about what my kids say, some of the words like capping, I remember when I was like, you mean that's crap? No, that's cap. What happened to the R? Like, we used to say that's crap. So the language is shifting all the time. When I think about trying to help my children with doing math, and I'm telling them the old school way, and I'm like, y'all are going to do it this way because this is how I know how to do it. And let me show you, this plus that divided by this is that. And that's correct. And then they come home graded with an F because it was absolutely wrong. You know that there must be something intentional about everything shifting, the way that we think, changing terminology, making old terms that we've always known confusing, like something as simple as what is a woman, right? What is a woman? I mean, for us to be at a time and space in society where people don't know how to answer that question, maybe that's probably why there's so much confusion out there about what does it mean to be a wife. But I do believe that we can always go to the source to get those answers, and that's where we should look. As long as we have the source available, we need to be cracking it open and seeing what it is that God has said so that we know how to navigate our lives. So that's what we're going to do here on the Suitable Helper. I want to continue the conversation from last week and just drop some nuggets for you, some ideas about what does it actually mean to be a wife. Is there one way over another? Is there a right way? Is there a wrong way to do wifing? And so we're going to jump into it. But first, I just want to play a few clips from our walk in the streets when we were out there last week out on the Beltline, just to give you some perspective on what some of the things people were saying. When you think of a wife, what icons come to mind?
Sorry.
Man.
You're going to get yourself into a hole.
Yeah, let's try not to.
Breathe. Yeah.
I think of warmth, organization, and love and flowers, because that's just what I get from my wife and how I relate to her. Yeah.
I don't know. I think in terms of roles, we do share almost everything equally because we both work. We both everything's very equal. It's more just, I think, like you said, the organizational side of running a home is what I do. Because even if he's cooking, it's like, well, we're making this or we have this, that sort of thing. But I definitely come up with the list, and then it's like, you do this and you do that sort of thing. But there's no really set roles. Although I make him take out the garbage, and
That's
I'm like,
right.
those are blue jobs. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree about blue jobs.
You're gonna say?
I do the dishes, I take out the garbage, I do those blue jobs, but for the most part, yeah, pretty evenly split.
A really strong commitment. You know, I'm old school, so I could compare marriage from when I was growing up to marriage today. It is definitely totally different. It's a commitment by, I don't know, it's like a piece of paper that bounds you together.
I do believe a little bit in the traditional kind of house, roles still, the gender roles. But I also, my mom was also in charge of my dad's finances. And even though he made the money, she still, saw the money in the account. So it was very much a very open, transparent relationship. And that's something that I want in my partnership.
All right, guys, we're back. And isn't that interesting? Nobody had a succinct idea, a crystal clear idea as to, number one, what is a wife? What are the roles, and what's actually expected of me? And so, of course, it does matter the environment in your household, right? So as a suitable helper, you need to be suitable to the person that you are with, right? So there are some, there's some things to navigate there, but then there's what God said. And so we have the difference between being a wife and being married. They are two different things. And I'm going to tell you right now, just because you are married does not mean that you are a wife. And I'm going to give you all the scriptures and the references down in the description so that you can actually pull these scriptures yourself. I'm not making this up, and this is not going to be opinion because I think it's that serious. I think that because this is the word of God and he created marriage and he was the one that said it was good and it is the first foundation created ever, I think it's important for us to go to the word and actually say what he said and give biblical reference to it. So that's what I'm going to do with this. And we're going to go in all kinds of different directions. I want you to stick with me. I don't want you to grow weary in this well-doing, because right here, this is about building a foundation. We're going to get to the self-care. We're going to get to the living your life and like it's gold. And we're going to get to all the other exciting things as wives that we get to do. We're going to get you to that Proverbs 31 woman place. But I think in order for you to grow well, you need to come from a strong foundation. So listen up. The thing is that your marriage is so very different from being a wife, because your marriage represents the covenant and the institution of your marriage, right? The marriage possesses a lot of things. And one of the things the marriage possesses is you as a wife. So when you come into a relationship as a wife, the marriage possesses the wife, but they are two different things. We know that biblically, in biblical times, when you were to get married, it was a transfer of property. Right. And so that's where we get these ideas of a dowry and of passing over a woman to another family and taking on her name. When you get married under covenant, it is a agreement, a binding agreement with God as a witness. Right. So that is the covenant. And it is meant for us to be married till death do us part. And you can find the scripture that references that in Malachi 2:14. And it says that this covenant is meant to be lifelong, and it is meant to be enduring like God's commitment to us, right? And so even though these are some of the old school things that we don't hear talked about much, this is very important to God. Also, the marriage owns the covenant, okay? So the marriage in and of itself is an institution, but it owns the covenant. And so the covenant is the idea of ownership, right? So when I come into agreement with my spouse, committing to be his wife, his suitable helper, the one that is there to support him through whatever it is God has given for him to do, now I am owned by this agreement, by this covenant, which is a threefold agreement with myself, my spouse, and God. I think the thing to understand about that covenant is that it's not meant to be, this domineering, dogmatic thing. It's not about that. It's about two people coming together to uphold a commitment and a promise with one another. And so even though this is legal, and we're still in the olden days, right? What we would read in the Bible, even though this is a legal passing on and ownership, my covenant owns me as a wife in the same way the covenant owns the husband as a husband, right? So the two can't be without each other inside that covenant marriage. It is a threefold agreement that we're all coming into. So it's not meant for the wife to be beneath or controlled or manipulated, but we all do have our individual roles. The other thing that we should know is that marriage is an institution. So we know that it was the first institution established by God, and he said that it was not good for man to be alone. I will make him a suitable helper. And he made the wife, Eve. We know that. And so the fact that it is an institution, it actually created a social structure. And that institution is important to God because it's like his footprint here on the earth. The institution that is established is between man and woman, and they are supposed to multiply and dominate here on the planet. We are supposed to spread God's image here in the earth. We do that through having babies, right? And so there is the structure that plays a huge part in it. In addition to the legal structure of it, then there's the foundation of family. And every society, if there is no family, then you have complete and total anarchy. And so the idea is that we would begin to multiply the image of God through our families here on the earth. Of course, with marriage being an institution, there are also legal and economic implications when it comes to marriage, right? So, of course, if you're married, you have a legal contract. In certain countries, again, we mentioned there are dowries, and that's when somebody will pay for a wife. You will give a certain amount of money in exchange for this valuable thing, this woman. Can you believe that? Like there are places where you are so valuable, wife, that somebody is going to pay for you. They're going to pay for you to come into that family, to establish that home, to birth children, and to raise children. So you are super valuable. Okay, you are as precious as rubies in the eyes of God. And so, yes, there were dowries paid. And even in modern day marriage, there's a marriage taking place and the father is expected to pay for the wedding, right? That's traditional. The father of the daughter is going to pay for the wedding. And so there is this consistency that you see, that there is value in marriage and there is money to be exchanged. So there is something about that. So that marriage, which involves legal contracts, means that there is something transferred when you sign on the dotted line. It's not just, I'm going down the aisle and I'm going to get married in my beautiful dress. No, there is responsibility transferred. When people would get married back in the day, they knew that this wife was going to provide something. They would actually want to know, okay, first of all, has this wife been touched? That's number one, because you needed to be a virgin. The second thing was, is this wife able to produce children? We want to know that. Okay. The third thing is, does she know how to keep a home? Okay. Has she learned how to raise children? There were certain expectations of a wife that a man wanted to bring into his home. And that's a big deal because we seem to neglect the understanding that without the wife, none of those things can happen. But also the wife does bring a certain establishment into the home and into the family. Her role is so much bigger than, being a beautiful, cute side piece. And the Bible talks about that, we should not be so concerned with adorning ourselves outwardly with beauty. We don't have to braid our hair up and put all the gems and stones in our hair and all that. Not that we can't do that. Beauty is fine. But if that's all you are, then you're not going to be as useful a wife as someone that has the skills necessary to establish the family and that foundation that is so necessary when two become one. So in a nutshell, when you're talking about the marriage, there's a lot of exchange and transfer that takes place with the foundation of the marriage, right? It holds the structure. It holds the institution. Inside the marriage is everything else that creates the type of institution that it's going to be. And there are lots of institutions out there. I mean, you think about, a university is a type of institution. A prison is a whole other type of institution. Both are institution, but they are housing two completely different things. A prison is housing prisoners. These are criminals. These are people that were breaking the law or were doing things that they should not have been doing, even if they didn't know that they were breaking the law. If you end up in prison, you have lost certain rights and you're being punished, right? Nobody would want to be trapped in a marriage like that. But what you put into the institution is what you're going to get out of the institution. On the other side of that, you have the education system. A college is also an institution. And in that institution, you have a lot of students. They're coming in there to learn. They're learning all that they can learn so that they can take what they've learned in that institution and make the world a better place. Two different institutions, two different ways of being. And so what you put inside the marriage is what determines the type of institution that you're going to have. Marriage is no different. But then you get into the marriage, and now we're getting to the wife. Now, we could talk about all the elements that go into the institution of marriage. Somebody might be saying, I hope she's going to get to what the man has to do. I'm not, because I'm not here to talk to men. I'm here to talk to wives. So I'm really just going to talk about what the institution requires of the wife, okay? And so inside this institution of marriage, the wife is and holds a very integral, necessary part to establish the family. Her role is irreplaceable, absolutely necessary in every single solitary way. So I want to jump into what it means to be a wife. Now that we've established that being married and being a wife are two different things. And I'm just going to preface everything that I'm about to say by saying, don't get mad at me, okay? And maybe count the cost. That's what wise people do. Wise people, before they make a decision to do anything, they count the cost. And what I know is that it has been hard for wives, let's just say women, before you've become a wife. It has been hard for women to count the cost of what it actually means to be a wife. Why? Because it's not marketed. What's marketed is be sexy. What's marketed is, housewives of where, whatever state, country you are in, right? And I don't even think half of them are even married, okay? But that's what's marketed. Your image, your body, your curves, your backside, your front side, all of it. That's what's marketed. Your beauty, when there's very little value given to that when it comes to being a wife. And your beauty is ever fading. I know you could get shots and cuts and Botox and this and that and the third to keep it tight. That's not the point. Your beauty is going to fade at some point. You're going to get older. But if you don't have what is required on the inside, you might want to count the cost and decide if being a wife is for you. Or maybe you just need to understand that you could be married, but maybe you need to have a discussion with your husband and say, hey, I'm not trying to be a wife. I'm just trying to get married. Because the wife, her role is all about partnership. She comes into the institution of marriage prepared to partner with her husband and all that comes with him. All that comes with him, okay? Partnership is a huge foundational part. Remember, it's in Genesis 2:18 where God decided it was not good for man to be alone and he was going to create the suitable helper who would be fit. And that is a big deal to say fit. Are you fit? When you think about something fitting, it makes you think of a puzzle piece, right? If you've ever put together a puzzle, you know that you got to move the shapes around and manipulate them in order to find the place where the puzzle piece connects and fits perfectly. It lands perfectly. It's flush with the size of the puzzle. There's no edges out of order. It fits. And that is what happens when you become married, when you are suitable. And it's important for you to understand that his intention originally was to create a helper that fit and was suitable for the man. But we already know, because I've mentioned it before, and I love to talk about it, that when he said that, he didn't mean your job is to sweep the floor and just have babies, which that is part of your role. I mean, if that's what it takes. But at the end of the day, you were to be the Ezer. And that was used so many times in the Bible, and it was compared to God as the helper, as the savior, as the protector for Israel, and so many other ways. So the wife comes into the foundation of marriage, or the institution of marriage, to help, to gird up against the husband, to support him and the vision that he should have. We're not going to go there, but we're talking about what should be. Because we really don't have to go where wives are right now. Where wives are right now is in a place where they should not be. A lot of wives are just misunderstood or are misunderstanding the call, and it was never taught to them, so they are operating out of order. They're just trying to keep up at the end of the day because they haven't known what to do. And that could be the same case for your husband, not knowing his role. But in this case, it's your role to partner with your Adam and support him in the vision. And sometimes the vision in your husband, it's there. You may not have seen it in a while because it's dormant. When I met my husband, all that we have accomplished and all the visions that have come out of our partnership were nowhere to be found. They were planted, they were in there somewhere, but I needed to come alongside my husband to speak life in certain areas and for us to grow together and to partner for some of those things to actually blossom. And so there's a seed planting in your husband if you are suitable. It's about you becoming suitable so that you have the skills necessary to pull that vision up out of your Adam. And that's something that we have never been taught, we have never been told, and we've lost that power and that authority that was given to us by God to be that helper that is suitable, that is like a savior, that is like a protector with your spouse. Then there's the relational dynamic for wives, right? So we're the nurturer in the relationship. We're the one that establishes the home. We establish the order in our homes as it relates to our children and all of those things. We are a spiritual covering over our homes in many ways. We are often the ones that are there with our children, nurturing them, speaking life into them, leading them in the right direction, giving them guidance, sowing the seeds that need to bloom in them later. Usually that's our role. Even though the Bible tells our husbands to be the spiritual leader of our houses, at the same time, our husbands being leaders, they come to us as advisors. Because oftentimes there's things that come up. There's issues, there's problems. They turn to us for the support. What do you think, wife? What are you seeing? How many times have you had your spouse do that? This is what's going on. Do you see anything? Have you heard anything? Because God gave us a certain wisdom, and he knows that our husbands will turn to us for that wisdom when we are operating in our marriages appropriately. See, it's interesting. People think that in order for the king to lead, he's leading all by himself. Absolutely not. Every king has some kind of a board, a community, some type of close confidant that he is turning to seek wisdom. If he doesn't, he's a fool. He doesn't have anybody to turn to. He doesn't have anybody to balance. Why do you think the CEOs in the world have an entire board that they consult with? And so God, in his infinite wisdom, when he created the institution of marriage, he already established a board in his own wife. And that's what he gave to the husband, to Adam. He gave somebody with wisdom and knowledge and understanding that he could turn to. Many people frown upon traditional marriage because they just have not understood it. And it makes me think about Proverbs 31 woman, how dynamic she was, how involved she was in the economic well-being of her family, how her husband spoke well of her, how her children spoke well of her. And this is an indication about how important the role of a woman is. It's not that we need to sacrifice anything. It's really just about understanding how God sees us and the gifts that are within us. Some of the things that we do, I mean, we stress over it. We think, okay, I need to be a businesswoman and I need to be out here successful in the world. And then we might tend to neglect our responsibilities at home. But God has given us the ability to manage all of it in grace and in seasons. And we have to know when those seasons are so that we can maximize it. There is a difference between our relationships and ownership, right? Ownership is a thing. Again, we talked about how the foundation of the marriage owns the husband and the wife, right? But the relationship part of it is where all the power is. And if we could reset how we see things in our marriages, if we can understand and look at things from a biblical perspective, we would be so proud to represent marriage God's way, because we'd be able to tap into the power and the authority that comes with it. There's nothing weak about a strong, godly marriage. All the power lives there. All the doors get kicked open with it. And when you are struggling, even when you're going through things spiritually or even physically in your marriage, when you have the right mindset and you have the spiritual skills available, you can go and do things spiritually that turn things around even before you see the physical changes. But you need to have a strong foundation and understand your role. You know, when we talk about marriage and you hear people in the church say, wife is supposed to shush and submit. People really hate that word submission. Submission is like a cuss word to most women, especially in 2024, right? Where we are women's liberation and, you know, I'm over here doing my thing. I don't care if you make the money. I don't care if you make more income than your husband. I don't care if you're the one that pays all the bills and it looks like you're running the entire show. There is still an order of submission that we must abide by. But submission is supposed to be mutual, okay? It's not supposed to be that your spouse is dominating over you, running you, and controlling you. That is a worldly way of being. That is the distortion of what it is. But no, the Bible is very clear that our husbands are supposed to love us the way that Christ loved the church. And if he loves us the way that Christ loves the church, that means that he's going to be looking at us and trying to make sure that that everything that he does is in our best interest, right? So it's not about him being in control and him running the show. Submission is mutual. I'm submitting to a man of God who is also submitted to Christ, and then it works. And it's like a mutual connection that takes place. Oftentimes we're not dealing with that, and that's when we need to go and understand how to exercise our spiritual authority. But when we understand that submission is a very strong thing, you know, we look at submission oftentimes like it's weakness. The hardest thing to do is to submit to someone that maybe you don't agree with right now. But when you get yourself into alignment with the things of God, it doesn't even matter. Quick story. I'll never forget when Hassani came to me and told me that he heard the call to become a pastor. And I was like, no, you didn't, because that ain't in the cyclical calendar. And that ain't something that we discussed in the meeting. So where'd that come from? And as long as I've known you, you have said, I'll never be a pastor. So wherever that's coming from, you need to send it back. You probably need to go back to the Lord and ask for clarity, because I didn't hear that never before. It was a terrible shutdown. I'll put it to you that way. And I just didn't have peace after that. I noticed that Hassani never mentioned it to me again. He never brought it back up. And God started dealing with me. And I started thinking to myself, did I miss it? Like, God, why hasn't he said anything about it? And then I started to seek God and ask him, God, if this is what you want us to do, would you say something? Speak. And God wasn't saying anything. And so I just remember I was just hemming and hawing about it. The last thing on earth I ever wanted to be was a first lady. And so I was really tormented by the whole experience and why Hassani never came back to me and said anything to me about it. And then one of my girlfriends was just like, Danielle, don't you remember you had prayed and asked God? You said, could you please, Lord, tell your son first? Stop telling me. If he's the head and I'm telling him stuff that I'm hearing and seeing, but he ain't heard it yet, and I got to wait for him to get with it, could you please tell him so that he could tell me, because I'll believe. And she reminded me of that. And I'm like, oh my God, You are so right. I had asked God to stop telling me first, to tell him first. Let me tell you something. The level of righteous indignation that rose up in me, I marched down the stairs. I went to Hassani. I don't even know what I said, but I had a whole speech that came from heaven itself about who he is, and you are a man of God. And I began to speak so much life into Hassani. But before I did that, I got a confirming word from God where he said, Danielle, I have Hassani's heart. So even though you're not sure about this and you don't have to trust, or you are not sure about this, or whether you can trust him, you can trust me because I have his heart. And let me tell you, I think it was maybe a month later where he started Legacy Church. And that was like the turning point. Because if I am his wife and it's my job to speak life, it's my job to understand and know how to water the seeds, but I use my mouth to spew negative seeds, to plant doubt, to plant fear. I've literally castrated the vision with my own mouth. And so I have to understand my role. Do you know how many women are castrating their husband's vision with their mouth? Why? Because of something that he did wrong, that was offensive, whatever the case may be. Rightfully wrong. He was wrong as two left shoes. But then we begin to continue to sow negative seeds with our words. We start speaking what we see. We start speaking what we remember. We start speaking doubt. We start speaking negativity. And that's what begins to take root in his spirit. He stops speaking to us. He starts believing what it is that we say. Do you know you have the power to change your husband's entire belief system? If you have a spouse that has doubt, insecurities, you have the ability to transform all those negative thoughts with your words. But see, you've never learned that. So you have ability in the sanctity of this thing called marriage and being a wife. Your submissive role isn't weak. Your submissive role is strength. You just have to understand how to use it and to wield that authority. The last thing that I want to talk to you is, of course, about the beauty, right? And the Bible talks about our beauty as a wife, that our value is more precious than stones, than rubies. And so there is a beauty component to us, and we love that part. We love to adorn ourselves and make ourselves look amazing. But the real key and the real factor in being a wife is the beauty that's held on the inside. That comes in the form of being able to pray, being meek, knowing when to hold your tongue, not having to be right about everything, not being so easily drawn into a debate or into an argument. Those skills are things that you can begin to develop and work and strengthen. When you can strengthen those skills, you'll be so surprised how how the environment in your home completely changes. Have you ever seen somebody argue with a wall? I mean, it's the craziest thing. Usually it's somebody that's really going through something if you see somebody arguing with a wall. What's my point? You do not have to be a conduit to frustration, aggravation, and arguing in your home. So we're talking about relationship versus ownership. And while marriage might carry the notion of ownership, particularly when it comes to historical context, the truth is that being a wife is more relational. It's really about your relationship with your spouse, not necessarily the fact that you are under contract, right? That contract is going to be the thing that you have to break if you needed to get a divorce. But inside the marriage, you could not have any kind of relationship with your husband and actually be married. You can never step up as a mother and create the family dynamic that you want as a wife, and you'd still be married, right? So you have to understand the difference. And then the other cool thing is that the Bible goes into talking about the inner beauty and influence of a wife. And even though we spend a lot of time adorning the outside of us as a wife, right? We focus on the beauty and the hair and the nails and all the things. At the end of the day, It's that inner beauty that's going to carry you, that's going to keep you in the marriage, that's going to keep you fighting for the marriage and learning how to do all the things to establish a strong, healthy family dynamic. The last thing I want to talk to you is about the Proverbs 31 model, which is something I know I'm striving to fulfill in my life and in my family. The Proverbs 31 woman, she exemplifies a wife who is deeply involved in the welfare of her household. Her relationship with her husband is marked by trust and respect, and also her actions demonstrate her strength, doesn't it? Right? When we see that Proverbs 31 woman, we see a woman who is certain, who is strong, who is confident, and who is out here handling her business. And she is somebody who is adorned with strength and dignity and wisdom. And those that look upon her see that and honor her and respect that. And so that is something that you can look forward to as a wife who demonstrates the right qualifications and characteristics, is that I get to actually model the Proverbs 31 woman who was highly impressive. She's not just fulfilling her duties, but she is actively engaged in a relationship that benefits her family and honors God. That is the key. So ladies, there is a huge difference between being married and being a wife. And we need to learn how to take on the role appropriately, how to make sure that we are suitable, that we are fit, that we fit in line like the puzzle piece fits into the big picture of the puzzle. And when you learn how to do that, interesting, God created a suitable helper for our husbands, but our helper is in heaven. He's our help. He's the one that strengthens us to do all the things that we need to do, but we need to seek him so that we don't go rogue like we saw Eve do. Okay. We're doing this right this time, ladies. So I'm really excited about some shows that are coming up. As we dive into this topic of being a wife, we're going to break down and bring to you tips and tools and tricks and all the things that you need so that you can be a stronger wife than you are even now and start to see the garden of your lives bloom. And I'm so excited about seeing those things. We have something called the Unearth program. And in that program, there are women going through an amazing journey. And I am blessed to be able to see these women bloom, to see their lives bloom and their marriages bloom in so many different ways. And I am excited to see that for you. So some of our upcoming shows, I'm really excited about. Our first guest actually is going to be our very own Couples Academy coaches that are going to join us live. And we're going to get into some communication topics, understand teach me how to talk. How do I talk to my spouse? Why isn't it getting through? You didn't know that there's a way? You got to learn the way to talk to your spouse. There's actually a way that you can motivate anybody, but you especially have a way to say certain things to motivate your husband to do the things, to understand the things, and to hear you in a way that you haven't understood in the past. So we're going to talk about all of that. Also, we're going to have an amazing guest, Tracey Bryant. She is from the Life After Divorce podcast, and we have a really exciting topic we're going to talk to her about because we want to understand what are the expectations when it comes to divorce versus the reality. Because I think a lot of people run, just like you ran down the aisle to get married, you run to the divorce office to go get you a divorce. And I think on the other side of divorce, a lot of people recognize that it's not all that they thought it would be. So we're going to talk about the expectations versus the reality. And we're going to have a lot more amazing discussions just like that so that you can begin to grow your toolbox. So that's it for today's show. Thank you for joining me. Make sure to comment and make sure that you subscribe. I don't want you to miss another show, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts. Are you a suitable helper? Do you agree with the idea that I'm supposed to be a wife that is suitable to my husband, or do you have a different perspective? We want to hear it. Make sure you drop it in the comments, and I'll see you next time.